Hello, and welcome to another class to benefit Eve University. My name is Amoni Panala. You might also know me as Zipporah Panala or Camille Panala. And I tried in my last video the second analysis of the equinox updates. I did a little experiment where I artificially sped up my voice because I've heard feedback that it is sometimes I talk slow, and I know I talk slow, so I try to speak a little faster. However, the feedback I got was that for people who speak English as a second, third, fourth, fifth, or English is not their first language, that when I do that, it sounds incredibly fast. So English is spoken at a much faster pace than other languages, and so it may be incredibly difficult to understand what I'm saying when I do that. So I'm not going to do that in the future, just because it can cause problems. But you can use the YouTube speed feature to play the video at 1.5, which seems to be the right balance between um, fast and being able to understand what the heck I'm saying. So with that, let's get on to our class for today. So today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart: bombers. um, the first time I went on a bomber fleet with Bombers Bar, it was a 24-hour fleet, and I ended up being there for 10 hours. I basically had to beg and plead for more torpedoes because I kept running out of ammunition. It was an absolute blast. 10 hours was probably a little excessive if I'm being honest, but it was good fun. I absolutely love bombers, and I hope that at the end of this, you will consider training into bombers and flying some because they are darn good fun. So, we're going to talk about what bombers are, what they're not. We'll talk about the skills that you need to fly them. We'll talk about the uses of bombers, where they fit in the sort of overall strategic thinking about using bombers. We'll talk about the support roles for bombers, and we'll talk about who flies bombers and how you can get involved in some MPSI bombing action. So what are bombers? Well, bombers are very small ships. In fact, they're frigate class ships, and they do an incredible amount of damage. Now, the reason for this is that they can fit torpedoes and bomb launchers. Now, torpedoes are massive weapon systems. In fact, by all rights, they shouldn't fit on a frigate, but bombers are specifically designed to fit torpedoes. So that allows bombers to hit way above their weight class, because they can fit these massive torpedo launcher systems that would not otherwise fit on a frigate class size ship. Um, they can also fit bomb launchers, which are um, essentially bomb bays or bomb doors that hold a bomb, and then you can drop the bomb and it goes boom. Um, Also, most bombers are going to be fit with some type of E-war, which um, a single bomber with some E-war is probably not going to do a lot, but when you get enough bombers, you get a critical mass of bombers, and they've all got E-war equipped, that can actually be kind of a big deal. So it is important to note that bombers on their own are not super great. They are very, very weak. And so it is important that bombers do not try to go in by themselves. They need friends. And we'll talk about who they should bring along, what kind of friends they need to be successful in a bomber fleet. So, as I said, they're very weak. So they have absolutely no tank. They are not intended for solo kills. I know some people like to do cheese fits of bombers. They'll like put rockets on them or something and kill explorers, right? That was the thing that was really popular when I was in Eve University the first time around. Is you'd fit them up with rockets and then warp to a relic or a data site and where some little heron was, and you blow it up. That's fine, but that's really not what bombers are intended for, and they don't work super well in that capacity. They are also unfortunately not available to alpha clones. Alphas, sadly, you cannot train into T2 frigates, so you cannot train into the stealth bomber. You also wouldn't be able to train into the cloaking. You can't train the cloaking skill and can't use the cloaking technology. So sadly, this is an Omega exclusive thing, and I'm very sorry. Um, the skills to fly. So, just to sit in a bomber, you need the following skills. You need covert ops, which requires you to have a Empire frigate trained to 5, right? Doesn't matter which one, you just need one of them trained to 5. You also need electronic upgrades 5. You need cloaking 4, and in order to train cloaking 4, you need CPU management 4. It does have to be cloaking 4. You can't get away with 3 because you need the Covops cloak. You need to be able to warp while cloaked. Um, you are also going to need torpedoes 1. Um, and that does require you to have light and heavy missiles 3. You also need missile launcher operation 4. So those are like just to sit in the bomber. This is not what you should train if you want to get into a bomber. If you actually want to get into a bomber and have fun doing it, there are a bunch of skills that you should train in addition to that. Also, anytime you see someone say train the skill to 1, you should really chain it to 3 or 4. As a general rule, I train everything to 4, unless it's an alt, right? Which I'm just training into a specific thing, or I am only training the skill for a particular thing that I'm going to do, and I know that the bonuses that I get from training that skill to a higher level don't apply to the reason I'm training this skill. And so I don't need that skill after I'm done with this one thing, then I might train it to like 1, right? But as a general rule, you want to train things to 3 or 4, and ideally just train it to 4 because the train time is not long, even on some of those high multiplier skills. Um, in order to really get the most out of your bomber, though, you also need to train some EWAR skills, right? So things like target painter, sensor linking, weapon disruption, and you're also going to want to train bomb deployment. Now, I will say here and now, it is very common to use bombers. However, bombers don't actually often use bombs, or if they do, they use a very special kind of bomb. And we'll talk about what kind of bomb that is in a little bit here. But I want to say up front that when we talk about bombers, we are talking about them as a weapons platform for torpedoes. And the actual bombs don't come into it nearly as often as we use them for torpedoes. So that's something to be aware of, right? They are tiny, fast, little cloaky ships that can use torpedoes, which is just absolutely bonkers, and a lot of fun. Now, if you want to ensure that you are getting more green on your kill board with your bomber, it helps to train up some of these skills to 4 or 5. So bomb deployment 4 is going to unlock some things for you, um, and we'll talk about the bomb types that get unlocked. But bomb deployment 4, torpedo specialization 3, really that should probably be specialization 4. But whatever, if you can get T2 torps, you're going to do a ton more damage. And that's going to be huge because the faster you kill stuff, the more the more likely you are to survive um, and get those kills, because part of it is a DPS race. Missile bombardment 5 and missile projection 5. These are your support skills for doing well with torpedoes. Make sure you train your support skills if you're going to train into something. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time. So how do we use bombers? Well, bombers are little frigates that can use a Covop's cloak, and they fit massive weapon systems that are way too big for the size class of ship that we're using. So the trick to bombers is that we're going to use BLOPS. So BLOPS is one type of fleet. We also use them in roams, we use them in wormhole drop-ins, and we use them in filaments, or sometimes called yeet fleets. So let's talk about those. A BLOPS is a Black Ops fleet. So essentially what this is you start out in a safe system, right? You've got your bombers, you got your support ships, you got your hunters and everything. And essentially the hunters go out, right? They start in a certain system, then they go out and they look for content. They're looking for things to blow up. And usually it's going to be bigger things. So it's going to be things like freighters, it's going to be things like orcas, rorquals, um, capitals, right? All that good stuff. They're looking for the big targets, right? And once they find something, they're going to light a covert sign out. And all the bombers get on top of one particular battleship called a Black Ops battleship. And this battleship has a unique ability. It can either bridge, which is create basically a temporary wormhole that allows you to jump from one system to another. So you have a temporary route from the Black Ops battleship to the ship that set up the covert signo, right? Um, and then you all jump in and you land and you shoot at the thing that your hunters have caught, and it dies. Everybody gets on the kill mail. Everybody's happy. Woohoo. Um, so, hooray. Um, this is one type of fleet. And it's worth saying that when we talk about BLOPS fleets, that doesn't always mean bombers. Um, when I think Black Ops or BLOPS fleets, I'm actually typically thinking of TC3s, but bomber BLOPS is a thing. And it's very fun. It can be really cool. It's a way to surprise your enemies, right? You're using the ability of the Black Ops battleship to transport your bombers to and from places as a way of sneaking up on your enemies. But of course, the risk does become that if you do enough dropping in a particular part of space, the locals may catch on and decide to do something about you. And BLOPS battleships are pretty squishy, all things considered. So we'll take a look at the Black Ops battleship in a moment here. The other is a roam, right? So Eve University is no stranger to roams. This is when you get in some ships and you head towards a destination, and then you head towards another destination, and you just keep doing that until people get tired or you got a really good kill, um, you know, something like that. Usually they're 2-3 hours long, and sometimes you get kills, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get kills, but the whole fleet just absolutely eats it, right? So you know that's a roam. With bombers, you can do roaming. It's just that your bomber is going to have to be specially fit. It needs a little more tank, right? So you might have less E-War on a roam fleet because you got to fit in some extra tank. Now, sadly, bombers are very tight on fitting. So even with tank, you're not going to be as hardy as other frigates, but you do have the T2 resists, unless you're polarized. If you're polarized, all bets are off. You're a tissue paper. Um, On roams, you're not going to find bombs. Basically, almost never are you going to have bombs on a roaming fleet. So, if you really want to use bombs on your bomber, roams are probably not where you're going to use them. So, maybe look for a different kind of bomber fleet. Wormhole drop-ins. So this is where you're kind of combining two things. You're combining the power of wormholes with, you might be that and the Black Ops battleship, right? So typically what you're doing is you're in a wormhole, right? Or you're in wormhole space, right? And you're connected to case space. So this is typically nullsec, right? So it could be like a 2 with a null static and a 5 or something like that, right? That's a very popular one for this kind of thing, but you're gonna roll that null set connection until you find something good. The hunters go out, they jump out into the nullsec and they try to find something to kill. As soon as they get the as soon as they get on it, then everybody jumps into system, warps to the hunter, and lands tackle and blows that thing to high heavens. Um, this is essentially relying on wormhole connections to find content. Um, it can be a really good way to sneak up on your enemies and secure kills. This is a big part of what Bombers Bar does with their Armada fleets. Um, so it can be a real fun time. It can also be extremely boring, especially if you go for a long time without finding anything. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. Um, and there can be a lot of false starts where you think you found something and it was on tether or it's in a pos or it gets away, and so you get all hyped up and then it turns out to be nothing and you're disappointed. So this can be great fun, right? But it can also be a lot of hurry up and wait, and that's actually kind of a theme for bombers in general. Is there's a lot of hurry up and wait, right? That old military saying. um, and so, if you are not a patient person, bombers are probably not a thing for you, is what I will say. Um, and then there is yeet fleets. Now, this is when you use filaments to um, take your fleet to a random part of nullsec. This can be really fun. It can also just be really boring. Again, if you're not a patient person, bombers are probably not your thing. But also, if you're not a patient person, Eve might be a really difficult game for you because nothing comes quickly in this game. Um, this is basically the poor version of Black Ops, right? This is your BLOPS for pores or your BLOPS for people with low SP. Um, Instead of being able to have hunters go out there and find some content for you and then sinoing to to that place where the content is, you are relying on filaments to get you there. And there are two kinds of filaments that we're talking about here for our purposes. This is going to be the signal jack or the noise jack. The signal jack is going to take you to a system that is active, and we're not quite sure what it means by active. It is most likely what it means is it's the NPC ratting activity, right? So this is going to take you to a place where people are Ishtar spinning in nullsec, or whatever it is that they do. Um, but that's signal. Noise is just going to be random. So it could end up being the quietest dead pocket you've ever seen in nullsec. Or it could be, I think one time we ended up in 1DQ, right? Goon staging. And so that was a bit spicy. It was fun, but it was spicy. Goons were great though. Thank you, goons, for being classy. Um, we had fun. So that's signal and noise, and this is one way to get your fleet out there. Now, I want to explain how bombs work because they are a weapon system that doesn't work like any other weapon system in the game. Okay? Now, CCP was probably going for something that simulated what it's like to drop a massive bomb in a certain period of time in history, invoke a little nostalgia, and whatnot. I don't know. But bombs are essentially deadweight momentum deployment, which means that when you launch them, they basically just fall out of your bomb launcher. And that means that in order to have any sort of control over the movement of where the bomb goes, you have to control your ship. And usually, what this looks like is you are going to land at 30 on a target. You're going to approach and you're going to drop the bomb, right? And the bomb is going to go in the direction and at a certain speed that your ship was going. So if you click approach on a target, right, from 30 kilometers away, you drop that bomb, then you warp off. That bomb is going to keep going in the direction that you drop that bomb. Now, don't ask me how that works because there's no gravity in space, but whatever. This is a video game, and there's a lot of things that don't make sense compared to real world astrophysics. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But that is the, in a nutshell, how bombs work, right? I bring this up because um, I have seen this done wrong so many times. And while enough bombs will absolutely cause chaos, even if you do it wrong, um, you can be so much more effective if you pay attention to how these bombs work. And speaking of which, we should talk about a couple of limitations that bombers have and how to get the best effect out of those bombers. So there is one bomber for each Empire faction, right? For Kildari, it's the Manticore. For the Amar, it's going to be the Purifier. For the Galente, it's the Nemesis. And for the Minmatar, it's the Hound. Now, each of them are damage locked on the torpedoes, or yes, the torpedoes side of things. Um, so it is very important that if you are going to fly a Manticore, you are using kinetic torpedoes. Same with the Amar and EM, Galente thermal, Minmatar explosive. Okay, so please, when you go to buy a bomber and fit it up, make sure you have the right torps. Now with bombs, it's ideal that you have the right type of bomb for your bomber. And if you really want to like min max this thing, you and your bombing group should all be flying the same bomber so that when you do drop bombs, you are dropping the same type of bomb and you're getting the bonus damage from it. But it's not as essential that you have the 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 um, the right bomb for your bomber, right? Like that, the damage bonus is not nearly as important, especially since bombers don't use the bombs as much as you would think for the given its name. Um, but the important thing is you are using the right torps for the ship. So you can definitely use thermal bombs in a Hound. You could use EM in a Manticore. When it comes to bombs, that part's not important, but you darn well better make sure you're using the right torpedoes because that's where it really counts. Now, bombs behave a very specific way, and it's kind of interesting because so you can only use them in nullsec and JSpace, right? You can use bombers in lowsec, but you cannot drop bombs in lowsec. Um, and you can use bombers in highsec, but you can't drop bombs in highsec. if you really want to throw away your bombers. That way you could use them in high sec. Or if you're war decked and you're bashing something that you're bashing a war deck target, use a bomber. That's a pretty good use of a bomber is to use your torps, use T1 torps on on something that you're bashing. Um, it is important to keep in mind that bombs are area of effect, and they will hit your own bomber, especially um, it isn't. It is calculated based on your signature radius, right? So normally bombs do not apply well to frigates, right? But if you drop a bomb and then you turn on your micro warp drive and you're still on grid with that bomb, you might just lose your bomber. Okay? Now, to my recollection, I have not lost a bomber this way, but I've had friends lose their bombers this way. Making this kind of mistake, it's an easy thing to do when you're just getting started in a bomber. I think I have been killed by somebody else's bomb because they dropped a bomb. I didn't even know they had bombs in their bomber, and they dropped a bomb, and I had my micro warp drive on. So keep in mind that your micro warp drive is going to cause what's called sig bloom. Your signature radius goes up significantly when you turn on a micro warp drive, and if you are on grid with a bomb, there is a good chance that you will take more damage because of it. Now, as you can see in um, in this screenshot I have here, you can see that the bomb has this is an electron bomb, right? So it's EM, and it has a damage resistance of 99.80% to electron bombs, or at least to EM damage, which means these bombs can withstand the damage of other electron bombs up to a point. Now, a bunch of number crunching nerds, bless those nerds, figured out that you can have a total of 8 bombs drop before you lose efficacy. So what happens is if you have more than 8 bombs, then you're surpassing the damage resistance of the bomb itself, and you're going to blow up your own bombs, potentially negating all the damage, some or all of the damage that you're trying to do with these bombs. Um, and I will tell you, I've been on a few fleets lately where I've seen some bombers warp in and drop their bombs, and there's like 9 bombs or 11 bombs or something like that. And it's just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You suck at this. So don't be one of those people that make me go, what are you doing? What are you doing? You'll make Auntie Amoni sad. Um, Now, it is important, and this is where, I was saying earlier, it's okay to use a different bomb damage type in your bomber. So you could use thermal in a hound, right? You could use the thermal bomb um, in a hound, and that's okay. It may not be the min-maxing route, but it's totally fine. And the reason you need to make sure that you're all using the same bomb type, the same damage type on your bombs, is because if you don't, you will blow up your own bombs. If one of your buddies has EM, another has kinetic, another has explosive, and you all drop bombs together, chances are that you're going to blow up each other's bombs because bombs are only immune to bombs of the same type. So you all need to be dropping EM, you all need to be dropping thermal, or you all need to be dropping kinetic or explosive, whatever the case may be. So it doesn't matter so much what kind of bomber you're in when it comes to dropping bombs, as long as you're all dropping the same bomb type or damage type of bomb. Now, there are a few special bombs, and I call them special, but honestly, when it comes to dropping bombs, more often than not, you're going to be dropping focused void bombs, if any bomb at all. Um, there are special fleets for dropping bombs if that's a thing that you're interested in, and you should look for, you're looking for bomber fleets where they specifically mention dropping bombs, right? That's the key there. But most of the time, if you do drop bombs, it's going to be focus void bombs. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself here. The Lockbreaker bomb is a giant ECM area of effect bomb. It's like, what if you had a million griffins on grid and you could suddenly jam out everything on grid? That's what a Lockbreaker bomb is. The Void Bomb is basically area of effect newts, right? Now the Void Bomb does 1.8k gigajoules of capacitor neutralization. So this is subcap level newts. It's quite a bit of newt power, but it's intended for subcap and will only work on subcap. The focused Void Bomb does 15k gigajoules of capacitor neutralization and only works on caps. So you can see how if you are hunting caps, if you're hunting freighters, um, you're hunting dreads, carriers, whatever, you can see why the bomb of choice would be the focus void bomb, because these things rep an incredible amount, and the only way to stop them from repping is to nuke them out. And the most efficient way to do that is to drop some focus void bombs. And it is important to keep in mind that even though these bombs don't do damage, there is still that 8 bomb limit where if you do more than 8, they will destroy each other. All right. Now, bombers are extremely paper tank and they need friends. So let's look at the different roles for the kinds of friends that bombers need. So one is going to be a fuel/loot truck. When you blow up big things, they drop things, and that loot is going to be valuable. Um, if nothing else, it'll pay for the SRP of the ships that you do lose, because you probably will lose a couple bombers at least in a BLOPS or any kind of bomber fleet. Um, as a as an entryway cloaky hunter, you can use a prospect. The prospect is the T2. It's basically a T2 venture, right? Um, it can fit a COVOPS cloak, which means you can use it on BLOPS fleets. And it is non-threatening, so people see one of those in system and they're not too scary looking. But of course, you can light up that Sino once you get tackle on something and send your target to Bob, or as I've now become a Sovnal, send it to the sun, right? All praise the sun. Now, the preferred hunter is going to be a T3C. And this is true for BLOPS, this is true for any bomber fleet, right? The real hunters um, are going to be the T3Cs. And if it seems like these are higher skill, it's because they are. Most of these are going to be T2 ships or T3s in this case. Um, Unfortunately, BLOPS is a bit of a higher. Any sort of BLOPS or bomber fleet is going to be a bit higher on the SP side of things, but the entryway is going to be that bomber, which doesn't take nearly as much skills to train into. Um, The next is going to be the Black Ops battleship. Here I have a Sin, which is the Galactic, the Galente Black Ops battleship. And that's going to get you where you need to go. Um, it is also good to bring some dedicated E-War. So if you can bring a Recon, right? I think this one's the Falcon, which is the Caldari, but you could also bring like a Pilgrim, right? Or an Arazu. Um, I'm blinking on what the Minmatar one is, but you need all of these things to have, like all of these things together make a really well-rounded fleet that's capable of doing enabling bombers to do what they got to do, right? And this is heavily skewing towards BLOPS bombing runs, right? But even if you're in a wormhole, right, it might be helpful to have these because it means you can project out just a little bit further than the system that you rolled into. And if you're on a roam, having a Black Ops battleship means that if your scouts find something that you're pretty sure is going to be spooked away, if you all jump into system, use Black Ops. Get yourself a Black Ops battleship and surprise them all of a sudden while you're on your roam. So definitely skewing more towards BLOPS, but that doesn't mean that these ships aren't applicable elsewhere, right? The main thing is that they got to be able to cloak, especially if you're on a BLOPS fleet. You got to be able to cloak because you cannot be bridged using a BLOPS if you don't have a cloak, covert ops cloak. All right. Now, for all of you alphas who want to be involved, but you cannot train into the cloaking and the T2, as we already discussed. Um, there are a few things that you could do. You could fly a bait ship, right? Um, Sometimes the prey that you're after is not going to do anything unless you make yourself look appealing, and that can involve getting in a bait wreath or a bait sigil or something like that, and warping around the system, warping to the next system over, whatever. Just basically looking like a big fat target. That's something that alphas can do. You could also fly a rolling battleship. Now, this is specific to the wormhole drop-ins that I talked about earlier, and this gives you the option of participating by helping roll things out, um, and rolling down things, finding new connections to new content. You can also be a scanner or a picket, right? So anytime you find a wormhole, it's a good idea to have eyes on it, unless you're going to stay on that hole while on a fleet, because you never know what's going to come out of there. And that's something that can be taken up by an alpha pilot. Now, these rules are generally done on alts, and that's for a reason. It's not fun. This is not the fun jobs. Uh, if you're on your main and you're doing this kind of stuff, um, I'm sorry. Like, this stuff is not fun. And generally, you don't get to be on grid. Sometimes the bait ship will be on grid, but the rest of y'all are not going to be on grid for the fight, which means you don't get out, you don't have a chance to get on kill mails, nothing like that. It's very, very boring, and that's why most people just use alts. Now, if I have done my job and successfully educated you on what bombers are, how they work, and gotten you excited in flying some bombers, you should definitely check out a few of these groups. So the first one here I have is bombers. It's bombers all the time. Um, it's always bomb o'clock at Bombers Bar, and you should check them out. They are an NSPI community. They organize public fleets that you can join, um, and they will do a couple different varieties of bombing. So their most popular one is probably the Armada. Most FCs start out with armadas when they're learning how to FC bomber spar fleets. Um, but there's a number of other kinds of fleets, the Habakkuk fleet, the whaling fleets, all that good stuff. So definitely check out Bomber's Bar. Also keep an eye on Spectre Fleet. Spectre Fleet is another long-standing NPSI fleet. Um, they do all kinds of fleets, and sometimes they will do bombers. So it's good to keep an eye on what they're up to because occasionally they will take out bombers. And last but not least, there is Fun Inc. Even better with friends. They are they're an NPSI community, but they also keep track of and maintain a calendar for all the NPSI activities across New Eden. So that includes Spectre Fleet and Bomber's Bar and any other sort of NPSI related group or any sort of NPSI activity. They're going to put it on their calendar if they know about it. If you let them know, they'll put it on their calendar and you can participate in activities with them and with any other NPSI community that is open to the public. So, definitely, if you want to fly bombers, check out these groups: Bombers Bar, Spectre Fleet, Fun Inc. All these folks have amazing content coming out, and they definitely are a place to look for if you're looking to fly some bombers. Now, specific to Eve University, we actually used to have our own bomber special interest group. Um, sort of I don't know if it was ever funny. It was called the Unibombers, play on the Unibomber, probably in poor taste. But the point is that if you want to see more bomber fleets, train into those bombers and let FCs know that you're interested in flying bombers. And you know what? Maybe become an FC yourself so you can take out those bombers. It can happen. It can happen. With enough interest, you can bring the bomber fleets back. So, thank you for watching. If you have questions, you can leave them as a comment on these videos since there is no live class with this video. Go ahead and leave your questions as comments. I will try to answer as many of those as I can. Otherwise, if you liked this video, be sure to like, subscribe, so you can be made aware of when I release new videos, and share it with your friends who may be interested in bombers, or you just want to show them this video to maybe convince them that training into bombers is worth it. Bombers are so much fun, and I I cannot recommend them enough. But they are a unique part of the game that does require some understanding. So share this with those friends, and until then, I wish you all the best. Fly safe.